What's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me?
Hey guys, it's Chris here, back in the building with the Week 12 playoff picture. And before I start this video, I want to wish anybody who does celebrate it a very happy Thanksgiving. However, I don't know if you guys can tell, I'm not feeling great at the minute. However, I'm trying my absolute best to try and churn out this video for you guys. And I think you guys will tell during the video that I'm definitely not my usual self. But without further ado, let's get started. As I've done with my previous week's worth of playoff pictures, I'm going to start with what's going on in the AFC, because the top four teams haven't really changed in the last few weeks, because it's the Steelers, the Chiefs, the Bills, and then the Colts occupying the four divisional leads. Meanwhile, the wildcards are currently occupied by the Titans, the Cleveland Browns, and none other than the Las Vegas Raiders of all teams. On the other hand, two teams that previously held wildcard spots, the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins, sit just outside the playoff positions. With the hypothetical or fantasy predictions, as I've made it clear in the last few weeks, I had the Chiefs versus the Raiders as things stood based on last week's predictions, followed by the Buffalo Bills against the Miami Dolphins, and last but not least, the Indianapolis Colts against the Baltimore Ravens, with the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens advancing to the divisional round, where the Steelers would take on their AFC North division rivals, the Ravens, and the Chiefs taking on the Bills. But then in the AFC Championship game, I still had what I'd predicted from the very first playoff picture, which is the Steelers against the Chiefs and the Steelers to make it to the Super Bowl. But at this very moment in time, I'm going to leave the suspense there, because I want you guys to guess who I would predict to win the Fantasy Super Bowl based on who I have as my NFC opponents later on in this video. Anyways, moving on to the NFC, and there are a couple of team changes in terms of the teams jockeying for position in the NFC, because of the fact that we now have a new leader at the top of the tree of the NFC, that being the New Orleans Saints. But in a very close second, we have a new leader atop of the NFC West. That team, none other than the Los Angeles Rams, who seem to be charging very much into playoff contention. However, there was one mighty shock, because the Packers have fallen from the top seed of the NFC. The Eagles, well, they're still sitting pretty in fourth of the NFC, because after all, there's no one threatening them for the NFC East lead. However, the wild cards right now, they are occupied, by the Seahawks, the Buccaneers, and the Cardinals. So it is very much a very close three-horse race for the NFC West title. And how huge could that division win be for the whole of the NFC West and for the NFC come the playoffs? Based on last week's Fantasy NFC wildcard games, I had the Saints versus the Seahawks in what could be an epic battle, well, hypothetically, between Drew Brees and Russell Wilson. Next up, I would have had the Arizona Cardinals against the Los Angeles Rams in a titanic NFC West game, where Murray would have faced against Jared Goff. And last but not least, I would have had the Eagles against the Buccaneers. Yes, that I don't know if you guys can tell, but that is the semi-disappointment, the fact that we have a team with a losing record in the playoffs, but is what it is really. You can't really do anything from it. But from those games, I had the Seahawks, the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers winning those games, with Seahawks taking on the Packers at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, the Cardinals facing off against the Buccaneers, but I'd have Tom Brady and Russell Wilson winning their games respectively and facing off in the NFC Championship game. However, Russell Wilson would get his revenge, hypothetically, on Brady and make it to his third career Super Bowl, where they faced off against the Steelers, once again, based on the Week 11 fantasy. And then, of course, as you guys guessed, the Seahawks would hypothetically face off against the Steelers in Super Bowl 55, but the team I'd have predicting to win that game would be none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers, because so far I'm very convinced that they are going to make a deep playoff run, but you never know what's going to happen. The Steelers might not even make the Super Bowl, nor the Seahawks, but we just got to wait and see how the season develops. If the playoffs were to start today, starting with the AFC, obviously, like I've done in previous weeks, I would have had the Chiefs facing off against the Raiders at Arrowhead Stadium. As much as the Raiders, they are a pretty good team so far from what I've seen this season, I don't see the Raiders beating the Chiefs for a second time this season. By the way, that would, in theory, be their third matchup if the playoffs were to start today. But honestly, I don't see it happening, and I can only see the contest going one way: Chiefs to win the fantasy matchup. Next up, we've got the Buffalo Bills against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, I have to say, are doing a splendid job, so far this season. However, the Bills, they've been quite consistent so far, and I think the Bills should win quite comfortably. Next up, we have a grand AFC South encounter between the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans. But I think if there's one team that can beat the Tennessee Titans, it is the Indianapolis Colts, because the Titans these days, I think the Colts have proven to be their kryptonite, and I expect all 4 divisional winners to make it through to the AFC divisional round. The NFC playoffs had started today as well. We currently have the Los Angeles Rams facing off against their division rivals, the Arizona Cardinals. Wait, did I just say that correctly? Because I said Arizona Cardinals versus Los Angeles Rams last week. Yes, I did say that correctly, by the way, because how a week in the NFL can change things. Because last week, the Cardinals were on top of the NFC West. Now, the Los Angeles Rams have control of the NFC West and potentially the destiny of the playoffs. But I can see that game being a very tight one, maybe even coming down to last-minute touchdown or field goal. However, I'd expect the Rams to beat the Cardinals if that game was to go ahead. Next up, we'd have the Packers against the Buccaneers. Rodgers versus Brady, Chapter 2 of this season, that is. However, following the previous meetup when the Buccaneers absolutely torched the Packers, I don't expect that to happen again from Aaron Rodgers, and I'm expecting him to prove that game was a sheer fluke and Rodgers to beat Brady and advance to the next round of the NFC playoffs. And next up, obviously, we've got the Eagles against the Seahawks. Can only see it going one way: Seahawks to win. Based on those hypothetical wildcard predictions, I'd have the Pittsburgh Steelers facing off against the Indianapolis Colts, and I'd have the Kansas City Chiefs facing off against the Buffalo Bills, where I'd expect the Steelers and the Chiefs to make it through. And like I have done in previous weeks, an AFC Championship showdown between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs, where Big Ben finally gets back to another Super Bowl. And you guessed it, well, of course I'm going to say the Steelers will win the Super Bowl, but who would they face based on my NFC hypothetical wildcard predictions? Well, just wait and see, because there's a plot twist incoming. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the last few weeks of NFL playoff picture predictions, I've put the Steelers against the Seahawks every single time. However, this week it's changing, because for once I'm no longer backing the Seahawks to win the NFC Championship, because which team will replace them, you'll find out, because the Saints will take on the Seattle Seahawks in New Orleans, and I am expecting Russell Wilson and the Seahawks to come out of there alive, because of the fact that I don't think Drew Brees in recent seasons has lived up to any regular season expectations, so I expect that to very much continue. The Rams will face off against the Packers, and I'm expecting the Packers to advance to, once again, another NFC Championship game, which sets up Rodgers versus Wilson for the NFC representation in Super Bowl 55. And who's my money on this time? Yes, I think you guys might have figured it out, but I'm not backing Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. I'm backing Aaron Rodgers and his Green Bay Packers to make it to Super Bowl 55. By the way, the reason why I'm saying that is that in the last few weeks, I've started to question whether the Seahawks attack, or offense, if you guys sometimes want to call it, it's not been motoring as much as it has been in the first few weeks of the season, and I think production could slow up come the NFC divisional round and possibly the NFC Championship game. And I think playoff Rodgers will come into full effect, and I think he will make it back to another Super Bowl. Well, Aaron Rodgers will make it to a second Super Bowl where he'll face Big Ben and Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 55. And lo and behold, I don't know if you guys can see on the screen right now, but as always, I'm going to put the Steelers to win Super Bowl 55 and their 7th Vince Lombardi trophy. If you guys want to call me out for any so-called inconsistencies on my predictions, then I can understand that, because I'm only basing these, by the way, on what the playoff standings are telling us, because they do change each and every single week depending on the performances of each team. So there's no guarantee that we get the teams that are in the same standings every single week, because they will play each other. Well, some of them will at some point during the season. So it's not fixated, and these are hypothetical, hence why I kind of say that word probably a bit too often, it's fair to say. But I do kind of imagine if the playoffs were to end that day, which is at the start of the week before any games were played, then I'd make my predictions based on those. That is how I'm doing it. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to check out my playoff picture from last week, the video is right here. If you want to check out my predictions for this week, the video is right here. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel right here. And until next week, guys, peace out.